there, this is Kristen Kiefer, and you are listening to episode number 17 of the Well Storied podcast, where I share tips and tricks that help writers craft sensational novels and build their very best writing lives. The Well Storied podcast is made possible by my lovely Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to help support future episodes of the podcast, as well as every writing resource I create for Well Storied, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/wellstoried. Today, we are breaking down the latest article I wrote for the Well Storied blog, entitled, What is New Adult Fiction? The topic of this article and episode were actually suggested by one of my Patreon supporters. They asked to remain unnamed, but I'd like to give them a big shout out and a special thank you for suggesting such a great topic. I'm currently writing a new adult book of my own, so this article and episode topic were all too pertinent. Well, ready to dive in? You can find the transcript for today's episode over at well-storied.com/blog. Now, without any further ado, let's get started. Have you heard of new adult fiction? New adult is an emerging market that brings readers in their late teens and early 20s who are all too often missing from the pages of both young adult books and adult books to the forefront. This may seem like cause for celebration, and it is, but in the 10 years since it first emerged, new adult books have struggled to overcome heavy stigma. It's this stigma and how we can push past it to make the most of this fantastic new emerging market that we're going to talk about today. Let's begin by talking about the new adult stigma. New adult books are obviously written with new adults in mind, specifically readers that fall between the ages of 18 and 25, though some consider the market to range as far as age 30. Suddenly thrust into a wealth of new responsibilities and their own legal agency, it is no wonder that new adults face struggles that both their underage peers and older adults with well-established careers, families, and lifestyles simply don't. Everything that takes place in the life of a new adult is indeed new. It can be difficult for them to find their footing in many aspects of their new adult life, which is exactly what new adult books address. Or rather, what you'd think that new adult books address. Unfortunately, when new adult books emerged roughly 10 years ago, they did so almost exclusively with plotlines that can rather unanimously be summed up as young adult fiction with explicit sex. In other words, new adult mainly consisted of erotica set within universities where Greek life cliches reigned and no one actually matured into adulthood. And while I'm in no way here to judge this kind of story, because please, please, please write and read the stories that you most enjoy, I can confidently say that this is not the kind of storyline that most, or at least many, new adults want, need, or experience for themselves. So how do we move past this new adult stigma? How do we bring this emerging market to its fullest potential? Well, by writing the stories we'd like to read, of course. New adult readers need diverse new adult stories. They need to see themselves and their own experiences represented in fiction just as much as any other age or people group. And fortunately, there is a market for this kind of new adult fiction. Over the past few years, new adult has been pushing against its boundaries. And while it still may not have its own section in bookstores, it's increasingly sought by agents, acquisitions editors, and readers alike. So go and write into existence the change that you want to see in the industry. I know I am. But what makes new adult different from young adult or adult fiction? Believe it or not, there is some pushback against new adult fiction. Usually, this pushback involves garbled grumblings in which the only words that can be determined are immature and millennial and entitlement. But I still think it's important to reiterate why I believe new adult to be so important in the first place, and what separates it from its neighboring markets, especially as I'm a new adult myself. Whether we like it or not, our current political, social, and economic climates in the Western world, or at least here in the US, mean that there is no smooth transition from underage teen to successful adult. New situations and responsibilities bring with them new challenges and emotional hurdles, some of which teens and adults may also encounter, but that certainly stand as hallmarks of the new adult experience. And these elements, these new situations and introspective challenges, serve as the most common themes in new adult fiction, which may include the coming of age experience, mental health, physical, verbal, and/or mental abuse, politics, social issues, sex and sexuality, emotional growth, relationships, and other such topics. Again, I would like to reiterate that these themes often appear in young adult and adult fiction as well. So, what truly separates new adult fiction from its neighboring markets? Perspective. How these themes are explored and presented from both a teen's perspective and the perspective of someone with a well-established adult life will vastly differ from that of someone newly thrust into the responsibility of adulthood. The media that we consume invariably has a large effect on our lifestyles and our mindsets. Diverse new adult fiction has the potential to help facilitate new adults through the immensely stressful and emotional experiences they face in their day-to-day lives, which is why championing new adult fiction beyond its stigma is so important to me. I'm currently working on my own new adult book, a medieval fantasy novel called Lady Legacy about a 24-year-old Claire Gotrek who sets out to become the greatest physician in history and discovers along the way a world that is much darker and more complex than she'd ever imagined. So tell me, writer, what new adult story will you be writing? Have you ever considered writing new adult fiction, or has the market stigma held you back from writing it? I would love to hear about your own experiences. And if you're working on a new adult book, or if you have any diverse new adult reads that you'd like to recommend to me, make sure to head on over to the transcript for today's episode, which you can find at well-storied.com/blog, and let me know. I would love to hear from you. Friends, thank you again so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, goodbye!